All right, everyone. Remember when the WaPo case, the defamation case by the Covington kids against them, was dismissed, and people on the far left crowed about it, thought it was great, and had another layer of rallying cry about how the Covington kids, by being approached by other people, somehow were being Nazis or doing something wrong. For those of you that don't remember, the Covington kids were there in D.C. They were part of some pro-life block, some religious school or some shit like that. And they were approached by other people that were saying nasty things, specifically the black Israelis. That particular group is very funny. They're more amusing than anything else. Just look it up on YouTube. But they were basically, shouting racial slurs and stuff. And there were some Native American marchers there the same day. I'm not sure why all of these different groups were marching in the same area at the same time. Seems like a bad idea. Because people, like to punch individuals for political reasons now. It's become normalized to throw rocks and piss bottles at people, and usually the police won't even be allowed to do anything by their shady commissioners. Anyway, the Native American marchers came over, and they were banging on their drums, I think in part to drown out the black Israelis saying racist shit. Covington kids got it in their heads to sort of dance and do their chanting that's, I guess, associated with their sports team. Unfortunately, the legacy media construed this as the Covington kids approaching the Native American marchers and doing that to mock them. That never happened, though. But it was reported on as though it had happened. Now, if all you had to do in this case was look at the footage, and you would know that wasn't the case. You can see quite clearly it's objective what happened. If they had just reviewed another angle of the footage, which was widely available and completely viral on YouTube, what happened is that the Native American drum player and his cohorts approached the Covington kids. One of them did say something racist to the Covington kids. Oh, go back to Europe. You don't belong here, I believe was what he said. They approached them. The Covington kids didn't do that. The Covington kids didn't start chanting until the Native Americans were already up in their face chanting. Initially, it was to drown out a totally different group off to the side. That's what happened. The Covington kids did nothing wrong. They did not aggress anyone. They did not try to intimidate anyone. Sandman did nothing wrong. He literally just stood there. The fact that he was standing there smiling pissed people on the left off. He was smiling while white was basically what it boiled down to. The Washington Post reported on it as though the Covington kids physically approached another group and began mocking them. That is wrong. They insinuated it was for racial reasons. That is wrong. They did not retract the story for hours and hours. That was the wrong thing to do because they were openly confronted cross-platform with evidence that they were wrong. It should have taken them 5 minutes to realize they were incorrect, issued an apology and a retraction, said, look, we're not going to report any more on this until we know physically what happened. They jumped the gun because the story went viral. But now, a higher court has reversed the dismissal, so the case is back on. Now they're going to the next step of it, which is that they can, I guess, call in witnesses, provide evidence and stuff, check, they're going to be able to go through some of the communications of WaPo to see what the reason was for their specific reporting. The insinuation is that they jumped the gun on the story, and even after being told that they were wrong, that Sandman and the Covington kids did nothing wrong, they didn't even approach anyone, they were literally standing there, that nothing they did could possibly be construed as racist, and yet WaPo and other groups were reporting it as though it was. The insinuation is that they held off on doing so and continued to defame and tarnish and slander the Covington kids. Well, they clearly did, which is exactly why the higher court has reversed the decision. But you got wide reporting on the initial decision by the lower court to dismiss the case. Widely reported, Holt and all of these others cheering it on. Oh, haha, those Covington Nazis got what they deserve. It's okay if any of them, by the way, misses out on job opportunities or gets randomly assaulted in the future because someone thinks they're actually racist because of WaPo and similar groups reporting incorrectly. I have still even talked to people recently on that issue when I've brought them up. Like when Thunberg was getting criticized, people were bringing up the Covington kids. They said, yeah, but the Covington kids were Nazis and stuff. And you try to tell them, look, the reporting was totally wrong. Most of these groups did at least issue retractions because it's clear that they were not racially motivated in any meaningful way. It's quite clear. It is objectively, provably the case. We've got footage of the whole event that supposedly shows them doing Nazi things that never happened. WaPo was reluctant to retract. WaPo basically smeared it in their face, said, no, we stick by our reporting. The problem is, these groups, when confronted legally by the Covington kids' own joint attorney, most of them refuse to apologize. Now, of course, with defamation in this way, you have to be able to prove some sort of material damage. I would think we need to change that particular law. With regards to defamation, it shouldn't just be about what you have materially lost, but is there a credible reason to believe that you may lose something materially in the future? The fact is that when the Washington Post and CNN and the Wall Street Journal and all of these other groups call you a Nazi and say that you have done something specifically irredeemably wrong to another group of people with racial animus, that you have approached other people and begun mocking them needlessly, and that you're an aggressive bully for having done so, and you're a smug little punk racist. When that is said to the entire world, I would think that could affect employment. I could think that it could affect your personal safety, potentially in the future. Your ability to gain a higher education could be in doubt. Even if it's not on the surface, Yale rejects this kid with his 4.2 GPA. They don't give a reason, but it's really about the fact that he was one of the Covington kids. You've got these kids doxxed, publicly identified. You've had them threatened, their families terrorized. How is that not a material loss? By the way, why should it just be about money? What about loss of sleep? What about loss of security, loss of possible relationships? All of these other things fit in with the constitutional definition of pursuit of happiness, do they not? So why is it that that one particular thing is limited to material loss? Everything else is limited, like threat of violence. If you make a threat of violence that's credible, you don't actually have to act with violence. You don't actually have to plan to act with violence. You don't have to actually cause the other person to react as though you have. The fact that it's a credible threat and could lead to that is still able to be prosecuted. It's still able to be prosecuted in the criminal sense and potentially in a civil lawsuit. Perfectly allowed. Why is that not the case for defamation? Why is the threshold so much higher for this one unacceptable form of speech? By the way, it's not the speech itself, it's the after effects. The Covington kids have been materially harmed. Their reputations have been made shaky by WaPo and other reporting groups. Why are they not held to the same standard as somebody writing a blog? If you write things on a blog that are materially untrue about another person, and you leave them there and refuse to apologize, so that the person is considered a Nazi or a scumbag, or they've done something wrong or criminal, if you do that, you can get in big trouble. By the way, I mean, let's talk about maybe the tech world a little bit. If you put stuff like that on anyone else's site that platforms content, it'll usually get you banned. You can't just sit there defaming people on YouTube or Facebook or these sites. It'll get reported, it'll get taken down. Why is it that these news sites are allowed to do this, platform their own material, as publishers, of course, they escape all repercussions? It doesn't even make any sense the way that this is done. So I'm very glad this has been reopened. I hope they win the case, and I hope they sue the shit out of the Washington Post. I hope that the Washington Post is vampirized by so many individual cases that it has to go bankrupt and stop existing. I hope they have to fucking sell it off. I hope it makes it unprofitable to conduct that kind of slimy yellow journalism, because it's not ethical and it's not really even journalism at all. When you refuse to retract, a little bit different. So one time, I reported on a clip that had been posted to Twitter. It was out of context and had been selectively edited of the Krasensteins talking about things. The context was they were talking about like some shady business shit, and the insinuation was that they were discussing things they were doing wrong. Now, of course, in context, it was them discussing what was being said about them. It was them being sarcastic and joking about it. I was contacted by one of the Krasensteins after reporting on this because I didn't know the context of that clip. I took it down. I apologized to Brian Krasenstein. I think it was Brian Krasenstein, not Ed Krasenstein. I don't even like these people. They're like the most desperate never-Trumpers in the whole fucking world. They got banned, I think, from Twitter for botting, if I remember correctly, which, who cares? I think they got reinstated, but they were banned for a while, and I'm not 100% sure. I apologized. Then I made a video on the, to replace the one I had to remove, on the topic of the importance within the alt media of actual fact-checking, because we've got to be better than these so-called sucker journos over there that won't retract, they won't fact-check. And they are malevolent. There is malevolent intent there with the WaPo's reporting. They sit there and they write lies, and then they don't retract, and then they issue a little half apology on page 3, so to speak, and they expect that after hours and hours of this viral story convincing everyone in the country that these kids are Nazis and throwing them down the gauntlet, after they've gotten all that ad revenue out of people, then they issue a little apology. They should be held accountable. At the very least, all the ad revenue from that day, give that as the disbursement to the Covington kids as their payout. Probably be a lot of money, too, considering that they were making money off of claiming that these kids were a group of white supremacists. That's about all. Peace out.